everyone. This is Talking Foreign Policy, a critical look at Canada's role. This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour, which is a critical look at Canada's role internationally, a weekly update on different elements of Canadian foreign policy. And I'm Yves Wengler. We're coming to you from Jojage, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. And this is the 1 year anniversary, I guess, of major military challenge to the occupation and siege of Gaza, and I'll get to that later on. There's been lots of developments on Middle East politics, but first of all, I go through some of the developments, a number of developments worth touching on over the past week. The first thing is more reports on the climate front that are very disturbing. World's rivers face driest year in 3 decades in 2023, according to a UN report. And that's the flip side of climate disturbances. And for the first time on record, the Atlantic has 3 hurricanes simultaneously. And obviously you've seen some big devastation down in the US. And of course, Canada is a outsized emitter, greenhouse gas emitter. And those who are generally facing the worst of the effects of the climate crisis are often the least responsible. The Globe and Mail business section had a story that I thought was a little bit a little surprising, a certain level of honesty. It was regarding the judicial reform in Mexico and the Canadian-US governments opposing that judicial reform. And the headline of the Globe and Mail business story was "Changes to Mexico Court System Trouble for Business." And it was in-house. It wasn't a wire service. It was written by a Globe Mail reporter. And which I think we kind of knew that, and that's been stated by a number of different left-wing articles in recent weeks, and why the US and Canadian government came out, and this Globe Mail story, the business section story, was making that clear, and clearly trying to communicate to the corporate elite in the country that this is damaging. Obviously, that's principally the mining sector, though in Mexico maybe not. Canadian capital has lots of interests in Mexico, much beyond mining. Pipelines, I think maybe in the dominant private pipeline company, there's been some disputes with the government, the AMLO government, and pipeline company, getting the company's name now. So that was interesting. There was a delegation, I think I mentioned it maybe last week or the week before, of Indigenous women from Ecuador bring concerns on mining abuses, free trade to Parliament Hill. That was the headline of a CBC article. I think the CBC was one of the few that reported on it. But basically, representatives of Indigenous communities in Mexico, in Ecuador, saying we don't want this free trade agreement that Canada's pushing that includes the investment dispute settlement. And a bit of pushback, and Mining Watch Canada was a central player in that, and they detailed some of the Canadian mining abuses, which are extensive in Ecuador. The Barrick Gold story, I think we reported on last week or maybe the week before. Both Barrick employees in Mali were arrested. It wasn't much in detail about it. There's 4 of them arrested apparently. And the Globe business section had a big long story that went into some more detail on the matter, and it points out that Barrick claims that Barrick's invested more than $10 billion in Mali, and more than $1 billion in the past year. So we're talking about pretty serious amounts of cash. Major interest. They claim its mines generate 5 to 10% of Mali's entire GDP. That's what the Globe story is saying. The Globe story also pointed out that Vancouver-based B2 Gold has been in this big negotiation with the government of Mali, who's trying to increase the state share to 35% of these foreign mining operations. And apparently, according to this Globe piece, B2 says that the disputes over its Fekola mine in Mali is largely responsible for the company losing about 5 billion in market value in recent years. So we're talking about some pretty serious amount of wealth, and there's no doubt in my mind. I don't know much of the detail in this, and it's certainly something that someone out there to do a bit of research on it. There's no doubt in my mind that the Canadian diplomats in the country are behind the scenes, and probably not just behind the scenes, somewhat publicly, are working to make right with regards to Canadian operations, to facilitate their negotiations with the government and the like. On Haiti, it mentioned previously that there's now a push that was begun. They got a resolution through at the Security Council, I think last Monday, kind of just as we were about to go on, where they got an extension for the multinational support mission, and the Americans, as I reported previously, have been trying to transition that to a UN force, because it's right now under this sort of, it's not a formal UN force. It's got an okay from the Security Council, but it's not a formal UN force. And so now they're pushing it. And now that's what the Americans pushed. And so now then they get the Transition Council to say that's what they want. Now, of course, the Transition Council is basically installed by Washington, a little bit of support from Ottawa. And so, but now it's like legitimated, the US push is legitimated by saying, well, the Transition Council wants that, as if it's just a legitimate, representative of Haitian will. That's not a new kind of dynamic. That's a common one. We impose our people there, then, we get them to say what we want, and then we push that, we legitimate what we want on the grounds that our people we've imposed are saying it. And Guinea is apparently about to send 700 soldiers to Haiti. So it is ramping up slowly here, but it is ramping up the foreign occupation of Haiti. The Globe published a piece headlined, "China and India Interfere in Diaspora Media in Canada. Journalists Tell Inquiry." And so the Globe, of course, is following pretty much every day has a story from the foreign interference inquiry. And this story about sort of the influence of China in Chinese language media in Canada, and mostly it's about that, but also about India in Indian Canadian media. And this is one where I actually kind of basically believe the claims, right? Like I believe that the Chinese government and the sort of power structure does influence first of all, media in Hong Kong, and the Chinese Canadian media, the papers there, the Sing Tao and I think it's called, that they are owned by well-to-do Hong Kongers. And so I believe that does, shape the media sphere, right? Like I think that it seems hard to believe that the Chinese government is not concerned and cognizant and has its different ways of formulating its own propaganda system. What I think is missing in that, of course, is that that's the same dynamic with Canadian media, right? That's sort of like lost. It's omitted from that discussion that, yes, power structures and government and state power structures particularly influence media. They do it everywhere. And they just like, our media is not just this sort of simply free press, as is sort of kind of implied by this kind of this framing. So at the United Nations Human Rights Council, the US put out a statement criticizing China's policy in Xinjiang. It was signed by 9 countries: Australia, Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Lithuania, Norway, Sweden, and the UK. Cuba then put forward a statement basically criticizing U.S. interventionism and criticizing the quote, politicization of human rights and double standards or interference in states' internal affairs. They got 80 countries to sign that statement. So Canada still aligns with a pretty small minority in terms of joining this Washington effort to demonize China around Xinjiang. The Globe published this piece, full 2 pages, from the James Griffiths, who's their correspondent, I think in Hong Kong. He's sort of the China-focused correspondent. And there's a couple things. First of all, the main piece is a couple pieces in this two-page spread. The main piece is Canadian military vessels stand guard for subs in the Western Pacific. And he goes aboard a Canadian naval vessel, and he talks about, it's basically targeting China. It's part of the so-called the Asia Pacific strategy of sending more Canadian naval vessels to the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait, and joining the Americans kind of located there. And I think he gets onto the vessel in Guam. He goes on it for a week. It ends off with a quote from someone saying, basically boasting about how Canada's, quote, "I did hear that Canada was definitely punching above our weight. So because we now have more naval vessels in the region, we're punching above our weight, and we should all be proud of contributing to the U.S. target China kind of policy." Now, the second piece in it is mostly just about life aboard naval vessels. Now they have Wi-Fi on these Canadian, I guess they're destroyers, and it's sort of just a sort of life on the ship and kind of modern Navy, how it's like it was 150 years ago, but how it's been modernized and this and that. And he ends it off by saying James Griffith spent 7 days on board HMCS Vancouver in August and September 2024, during which he was the subject of media embedding and ground rules agreement with the Canadian Navy. And then he says the Navy did not review these articles, and so this is all part of the propaganda, the public relations, if you like, of the Canadian Navy and Canadian military. They'll okay certain journalists to come aboard certain segments of missions, and while aboard, they're under quite strict rules about what they can say and what they can't say, and what they can't release. And I go into a bit of some of what we know in this history of how that's operated, and journalists kind of constraining themselves. And I think, yeah, it's just important for people to recognize how extensive the media relations planning and thinking and strategizing of the military is, and it's almost never conveyed. Like in this case, at least he throws in a paragraph at the end of the article, or end of 2 articles, a sort of 2-page spread that mentions this, but it doesn't really give us much more than that he operated under their rules. Doesn't say what their rules are, and it doesn't get into kind of the background of those rules, which is most importantly that the Navy does bring journalists, politicians, and others aboard its missions, but it does that with very clear political aims. It's not always successful in terms of those aims or those PR objectives, but they are well elaborated. And in that vein, the Ottawa Citizen had a piece. Puglisi has a piece in Ottawa Citizen this week saying legal action underway to force Canadian forces to release propaganda documents. And so this Australian, I believe she's sort of a military public relations academic expert, whatever. She's basically suing the Canadian military for their refusal to release different documents that I guess detail some of their operations, expose some of their operations. In this story, references this thing that happened a few years ago, which got some media publicity. I believe was the person who reported on a couple years ago. This whole odd operation the military planned in the Maritimes, I forget exactly where they basically created this sort of fake claims of wolves on the loose in the community. And I guess it was designed to kind of like get a sense of how people would react, but it really went off the rails and people kind of panicked. And so it became like a sort of public relations disaster for the military. And so, but in the story, and this academic that's suing the military to get these documents, she I guess is the one who kind of uncovered this. So even though the military people knew right away that it was in fact there was Canadian forces that were responsible for this I don't know, false flag wolf thing. That they tried to they initially their plan was to put it all on Russian disinformation, and they could claim it was like a Russian disinformation operation. And then I guess internally they people realize, well, that might blow up in our face because it's so obviously us, so it might get leaked. Who knows exactly why they kind of backed away from that. But even the idea that the military would be operating in that kind of thinking, and apparently it was some firm, I think US firm, that the military is contracted, that was the one suggesting that as an option of how to deal with this PR problem. Now on the Russia, and it also speaks to just the kind of like anti-Russia kind of sentiment out there. I think it was the National Post had a piece, maybe it was the Globe, saying new Arctic group puts Russia out in the cold. So the Canadian government is initiating this new Arctic Security Council. There's an Arctic Security Council that exists. I guess there's like 7 countries that are part of it, but with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Russia got, I guess, kicked out of it, and I guess it's sort of essentially dormant. And so basically, Canada's trying to get this new Arctic group off the ground, and there's not much detail in the story, but it very much kind of suggests a kind of militarization process in a quite a adversarial type of dynamic that Ottawa is pushing on this effort, which I don't think is a good thing. The Financial Times had a piece, I think it was Financial Times, saying that Russia to raise defense budget by a quarter. So apparently the Russians are now going to raise their military budget by a quarter this year, which is unfortunate, very, very unfortunate. But this is where we're going. It seems like increasingly across the board around the world. There was also a story in the Globe that mentioned, and maybe I should have known this, but I don't remember seeing this, which is that the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, the main academic research funding body, prohibited funding for research involving Russian institutions after the invasion in 2022. And that's interesting. And if you think of that in the context of the Israel encampments and all that question, is pretty remarkable. And this week, I did an interview with her on this, Tamara Lawrence, who's a well-known activist, peace person. She's been climate activism, peace activism for 20 plus years. And she went to Russia for 2 weeks and attended a series of conferences, did some academic stuff. She's at the Basili School of International Affairs in Waterloo. And she, upon returning at the University of Toronto airport, she got grilled pretty significantly by Canadian Border Services Agency and a CSIS agent. And I did an interview with her. You can watch that on my YouTube and on Canadian Foreign Policy Institute's YouTube. And I just saw that today she did another interview with Dimitri Lascaris. They went to a bit more detail, or some different details. And And one of the things that they draw out, and we kind of touch on it, but draw it a little bit more in the interview with Dmitry, is this kind of anti-Russia climate, and specifically this piece that Marcus Kolga and some senators published in the Hill Times a couple of weeks ago around the Russian disinformation, and basically saying that anyone who challenges the NATO proxy war is a Russian agent and should be treated as such. And that's the sort of the other side to CSIS targeting Tamara. And this business. So the CSIS agent, after she gets basically grilled for an hour by the border security agency, and then another hour by CSIS, and there's, according to Tamara's account, there's there's a whole series of sort of intimidating things he says. He says that he tells her address, a series of other things that basically, I've been monitoring you for a long time. I was off my shift, but we knew you were coming in, and so I'm extending my shift so I can interrogate you, like things like that. And an important part to me in terms of the intimidation side is, they could just call her up, they could email her, they could even come by her her university office, which I was at a couple months ago when she organized some events, the event I did in Waterloo, and helped with the event in Hamilton. Oh, she actually did an event. We did a smaller event at the Vasily School as well, and they can come by, even come by her work, but when they at the border, when they have the power, they have that leverage over you, right? So they can basically intimidate you into a interrogation. I don't know the exact rules of how CSIS is, how long they can detain you and hold you at the airport, and this and that. I assume there's some restrictions on that, but they basically have a whole bunch of leverage over you, and so that's it takes on a very different kind of tone. Even if even just an email or a phone call would have a somewhat intimidating side to it as the spying agency, but that's a much less of a intense kind of form than you're at the airport, border security agents hold you, interrogate you, and then CSIS comes in. And I think this is all tied in, as Tamara points out. She's been on all kinds of. She went to the climate summit 4, 5, 6 months ago, wherever that was. I can't remember. She's been to a whole bunch. Been to protests in the States, academic stuff in the States. She's been through the Toronto airport repeatedly in recent years, and it's the Russia trip that elicits this sort of intervention. So now we are at the 1 year mark of this incredible horror holocaust in Gaza. There's reports more coming out. This one from some American medical people saying there's no way it's less than 100,000 dead. If the official total number is 42,000 in Gaza, and then there's 20,000 unaccounted for, unidentified. So that would put us at direct kill of around 60,000, and then all the indirect deaths that's come of these horrors, and the destruction is unbelievable. This UN satellite thing said 68% of the permanent crop fields in the Gaza Strip exhibited a significant decline in health and density. 2/3 of the buildings are damaged or destroyed. It's incredible horrors, and the everyone's been displaced many times, and the fact that very few people have been able to leave, it makes it unique in wars and military onslaughts. And now there's this plan going on of basically ethnically cleansing northern Gaza and starving, that the generals called the Generals Plan. Antiwar.com has a piece on it with I don't know, I think it was Haaretz or some other outlet. Initially, I think 972 has a story on it as well. And this is just, like one horror after another. All by any like way you look at it, the number of children killed in a year. Oxfam had the report came out 5 days ago, 7 days ago. I can't remember exactly when. Of there's no conflict in the last 20 years where there's this many kids killed in this period of time. Uh, Almost any way you look at this, it's insane, the level of killing, a destruction for a pretty small number of people, 2 million, 2.5, 2.2 million, 2.3 million people. And so this is just goes on and it goes on, and Israel expands. Obviously, in Lebanon, what we've seen in the last couple of weeks, it's just some of the devastation of their whole business about the double tap, right? They killed like 100, I think it is, emergency workers in Lebanon already, right? Because they go and they bomb, they blow something up, and then when emergency workers go to try to find anybody or recover bodies or whatever, they go in and they do it again. And of course, this week we had this, and I got so maybe I'll give in. I was thinking a bit about this actually. What prompted me to kind of think about it, I think in some ways I'm late to the game here, but there's a piece that Naomi Klein had in the Guardian, big long piece about the how quickly they've mobilized the sort of quote unquote trauma of October 7th, the memorial of October 7th, to basically justify more criminal acts. And there's lots in this piece by Naomi Klein that's quite well done and quite fascinating. In some sense, to me, it's just sort of taking what's in Finkelstein's Holocaust industry and bringing it to this October 7th and showing how Israel uses a sort of historical trauma or historical to justify criminal activity. So that is nothing sort of like particularly new or whatever in that. But what it got me going on is a couple of things. One thing, it got me this: she completely ignores the lies of October 7th, i.e., the 40 beheaded babies lie and the rape lie, the hoaxes. And it's fascinating because it's a long piece. It's like 5 to 10,000 words, this piece. And so it's very conscious. Naomi would obviously know that these are hoaxes. I assume she's followed the coverage that's, for many, many, many months has been in Mondoweiss, Electronic Intifada, Gray Zone, Credo, and now has been, all over the Israeli press, the Hannibal Directive, and Al Jazeera has now done, this extensive documentary that details this stuff out, and this is all just like absolutely confirmed. Now, but she ignores that, even though the vast majority of her readers would not know this stuff. So I think that's fascinating politically, and that says a lot about liberalism and how one is positioning themselves. But what like in some sense, I kind of hate to say this because I don't like saying it, but one of the things that has come out to me about thinking about October 7th and thinking about all this stuff is that, as I said to my dad today, that Sinwar was right, like considered the mastermind of the operation of October 7th. The Israel and Zionism is such a beast. It's such a horrendous, violent, ethno-supremacist ideology, state operation that, like, what October 7th is completely justified by what Israel has done, right? This was, this was needed to expose how horrendous Israel is, right? How and so I find that, and so this business about you write about October 7th and Israel employing the sort of tragedy to mobilize to justify criminal activity and stuff like that. Sort of the elephant in the room here is that in fact it was obviously. I mean, I always understood it was legitimate in a macro sense, right? Obviously, what Hamas did was legitimate in a macro sense, but it's even sort of deeper than that. In that, this is. I mean, you like there's no way to you can't respond to this. All that Israel responds to is power. All that they respond to is violence. And as my dad responded to me in this, said, well, you're going down the path of the Zionists. That's what they want. They want to, be just might is right, become messianic. And so the other part to it is, and this is where it hurts me really as a sort of like a liberal minded, liberalism is not the way to respond to this, unfortunately, right? Like this is like you need to be as messianic as militaristic minded as the other side is, right? And I think that's why, like clearly Sinwar has decided that he's gonna get killed and he's gonna do this operation. This is as did many or most of the Hamas fighters, varying degrees probably of self, being conscious of exactly what was, they were doing. But this was sort of this was the process that you were going down, and I like so my dad responds by saying, well, you're playing into their hands, the Zionist hands of just militarism and messianism and this kind of stuff. And that's not what my conclusion is. Not to say that's what we should do here in Canada, or someone, a writer or whatever. It's that's what they should do there. That's the situation they're in. That's the situation Palestinians are in, Lebanese are in. Much of the region is in. Is they just have to resist it by the only way that this beast, this horrendous entity, understands, which is brute force and undermining their economy and punishment and pain and I don't know what other conclusion you can get from what we've seen over the past year, what we've seen in the last couple of weeks with Lebanon, and this is just like I said, I don't like this conclusion at all. This is absolutely not the way that I want the politics to go. I mean, this is not economic democracy and liberatory socialist libertarianism or anything like that. This is it's a grim option, but I don't know like what other kind of conclusion there is. And so anyways, this week, of course, Israel Iran launched 180 or so ballistic missiles at Israel, and of course the U.S. and Israel claimed they claimed they were both they tried to kill all the civilians. It was targeting civilians, and that they failed. I don't know. It's kind of a hard one. They were pulling off there. It seems like these missiles largely hit their target, which were Israeli military bases, the Nevatim and the Tel Orf, I believe they are. Nevatim is the main air base, and also near the Mossad headquarters. And the Trudeau government did what the Trudeau government does. It ignores all of Israel's provocations. They did this back in April as well. And when Iran hits back, they say, we unreservedly condemn Iran's ballistic missile attack against Israel. It is further destabilizing action by this terrorist regime in the region, putting civilians at risk and running the risk of a wider war. They never do that. They never unreservedly. He both unreservedly and unequivocally condemned in different statements Iran. I don't think I've ever seen him condemn Israel's Holocaust in Gaza. And this is it's basically enabling a response. Now, it's clear to me Israel's made lots of bombastic comments about responding, and they haven't They haven't done so yet. We'll see where that goes. The U.S. seems to be basically encouraging Canada. Clearly, Canada's comments are essentially encouraging Israel to do what it wants to do. But I saw some analysis out there that the Israelis and there is kind of, I've seen reports coming out like Washington Post where they are starting to talk about that. They initially it was all failed, Iran's unsuccessful, but then now it's sort of seeping out that actually it did a lot of damage to these bases, and we didn't shoot hardly any of them down, and this and that, and there is some analysis out there suggesting that Israel may be a little bit, the military establishment may be a little scared that this won't be that is Iran can, they do, if they go hard at Iran here, Iran's going to come back and they can make some serious damage. They can, kill lots of people. They can blow lots of stuff up. And that Iran, gave a couple hours of notice this time. They'd given a bunch of hours notice back in April. And then if they don't give any notice, and then there's rockets shot from Hezbollah as well, all this air defense business we're hearing about from the Israelis is not able to deal with this. And we've seen that Hezbollah also, which clearly has been massively weakened in the last 2 weeks, but they continue to be able to fire a bunch of rockets. Haifa, Tiberias, I believe is how you pronounce it, in the north of Israel, and so they're weakened, but not out of the game. So this is some of the background. We'll see where this all goes, but we're in a very dangerous situation. Bob Ray today in the National Post, CJPME noted this, that Bob Ray's claiming that Canada's arms license, export license, it actually has an exception for, quote, Israel's defensive needs, which is now a new addition that hasn't been admitted by the government anywhere. So it's not clear if that's true or not. He's just trying to tell the National Post what the National Post would want to hear. Now, a couple of comments about the Conservatives. So this week, the Conservatives made two wild comments on the Israel question. First of all, on the Iran thing, Polyev was quoted, I think it was in Wednesday's, maybe it was Thursday's Globe, saying about Iran's attacks, missiles, all of these attacks were targeted at civilians. None of them were pinpointing military targets. It's like literally like there's no piece of truth in that. It's every one of them targeting military targets. No Israeli civilians were killed. Apparently there was a Palestinian actually in the West Bank that was killed from debris hit by one of the, I guess they intercepted one of the rockets, or and the debris apparently fell on this guy in just a sort of freak accident. So it's just like hilarious. It's just like he's just like trying. How can I make the lie as like crassly clear as possible? And then the other lie that Michael Chong, and this is in the House of Commons, said, he's the foreign affairs critic for the Conservative. He said, I quote, "I have seen no credible reports of the state of Israel's violating either international humanitarian law or customary international law." The number of civilians who have been unfortunately killed in this conflict is not arbitrary determinant as to whether a state is complying with international law. Well, but I would suggest that the ICJ, the ICC, Amnesty International, all the UN special rapporteurs, every damn organization that has any sort of like relevance to this, like they've all come out publicly. So it's just a lie. It's just like beyond like comical a level of lying on this stuff. And I'm doing a piece that kind of starts off with this and explains like how they can get away with it. Obviously, these are power-serving lies. They serve the U.S. empire. They serve the Israel lobby. Get into all that. But it basically rests on the propaganda, particularly in the right-wing media, but just across the board. And Saturday's National Post is unbelievable. I read the National Post in physical form. I've been doing it, for 20 years now, whatever. And I've obviously in the last year, I've done that. And it's been intense. I mean, it's intense, like the propaganda is pretty wild. But Saturday's paper, I mean, it just took it to a whole other level. I'm not going to go over, I'm actually detail it all in this article. It's kind of boring. It's like, what this was on page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this one page. But basically the whole paper, the first 10 pages of the paper is just justification for Israeli crimes. They have 8 op-eds. 7 of the 8 op-eds are justification for Israeli crimes. They have a whole section at the back, a full section at the back, the supplement that appears in all of, or at least appeared in the Montreal Gazette. It probably appears in all of the Post media. The supplement, which is something like, I want the world to know what Hamas did to me, and whatever, right? They have a full page ad for the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center. And then they have in the business section, and then they have that Howard Levitt, supposed to be about labor law, who's for last year, like 90% of his weekly columns in the business section is just Zionist insanity. And it's sometimes framed as like tied to labor law, which is supposed to be what he's a labor lawyer, right? Corporate labor lawyer. But it's mostly just his wild Zionism. And then they have a quarter-page ad for the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation's upcoming ceremony, evening to honor, I don't have the exact wording in front of me, ethical media something or other. And of course, they're giving their prize to Roberts, who's the editor-in-chief of the National Post, right? So they've prosecuted journalists for their propaganda after World War II, right? I don't know how you can come, when you see the National Post on Saturday, I don't know how you can like seriously not say that, like, if you're gonna go after an Israeli soldier who's killed people in Gaza and then does their TikTok or whatever, which he always seems, and you're gonna say that they should be prosecuted for war crimes, and obviously that there's a greater degree of direct engagement than the editor-in-chief of the National Post. But like, the power question is that editor-in-chief in the National Post doing more to enable this murderous criminality, certainly I think, than the average soldier on the ground in Israel. I just don't know how you can't like at least seriously entertain the idea that these people should all be prosecuted. I mean, these like this isn't news. This isn't even commentary. This is just Holocaust propaganda. I mean, that's what the National Post was on Saturday. It was just, how can we figure out many different angles to justify whatever Israel wants to do to Palestinians, to Lebanese, to Iranians, to people in Syria, people in Yemen. Like, this is clearly what they were doing. And it's not like, oh, we fell into this. This is consciously being done. It's pretty remarkable. And that's where, where the Conservative Party officials can lie. Unfortunately, of course, it's not just the National Post, as we can see. I tweeted this at Samira, I'm forgetting how you pronounce her last name. She had a very good thing about the Toronto Star this week. And she shows on Wednesday, they get the active voice. Okay, so when Iran fires missiles into Israel, the front page of the Toronto Star has this active, Iran targets Israel, I think it's something like that. Very active voice. And then 2 days later, when Israel attacks Beirut and demolishes a bunch of stuff in Beirut, it's back to the passive. And I don't have exact wording in front of me, but anyway, she shows the two images of the front page, and it's very, it's very compelling. This is how it works, and this is, the most left wing of the English language, media outlets, Toronto Star, CBC. They do the same thing. They're not quite as extreme or crass or quite frankly criminal as the National Post, but they very much do the same kind of thing. A couple things to before concluding. The Mayor Levy, Jeremy Levy, the mayor of Hampstead, tweeted saying, "Waving Palestinian Hamas Hezbollah flags on October 7th is like waving Nazi flags on Holocaust Remembrance Day." So if you wave a Palestinian flag today, as we did have a counter demonstration at McGill 20 or 30. There's quite a handful of Palestinian flags there. It's equivalent to waving Nazi flags on Holocaust Remembrance Day. This guy is a total unequivocal fascist, but as are more and more of the Zionist movement. There was 2 men arrested in Toronto for inciting hatred because they waved Hezbollah flags after Nasrallah was killed. Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center filed complaint to Montreal and Toronto police over protests where they claimed there was like Hezbollah flags or other flags of terrorist organizations. There's a lawyer that Niagara police this week, Joanna Berry. There's a clip circulating online. She clipped of these 2 Niagara police come and interrogate her because 10 anonymous Ottawa Zionists made a police complaint around her social media posts. And so basically they went at her. I guess they're apparently going at her through the whatever the Ontario Law Board or body, whatever the professional body. And they also went to the police, and basically she's just making like social media posts, critical of Israel. And they got the police to actually go and do this. And some of the comments the police made about how she's walking the line and this and that. It's all part of this real attack, suppression. And today there was the campus is wild here in Montreal. So the Montreal police did a whole press conference on Friday, October 7th. We're beefing up the police everywhere. And so I bike by Cégep de Montréal, which is about 6 or 7 blocks from my place, and there's all these police there. Nothing seems to be going on. Then I get up towards McGill, police everywhere. At least there was something going on there. There was a pro-Israel rally, which I tried to get into and go talk to people, and the police blocked me from getting into it, even though it was right on the street. Unfortunately, the police officer recognized me, but so extreme, like the Sûreté de Québec. So they brought in like outside of Montreal police, tons, 100 police, horses. McGill shut down the campus. Not much going on really. There was a couple hundred people at the pro-Israel thing and 20 or 30 people in a sort of counter rally. And then over at Concordia, there's a walkout. There's a student walkout today, and there's just police everywhere. 100, maybe hundreds, I don't know, just tons and tons of police. It's just this, like, as if they've created this whole kind of like rhetoric, and it's all so dangerous, and Canadian Jews are under assault, and it's all this sort of like hyping up all this stuff. And the police, just watching the police kind of go along with this whole thing is pretty remarkable to see. Mendocino, in a video, he suggests that they're going to fund these Jewish vigilante groups, these private security groups that are popping up in Toronto. I'm not sure if that's going to actually happen, but that seems to suggest the Toronto District School Board, after the big kerfuffle about the Grassy Narrows protest, and there was some pro-Palestinian chants there, they shut down. They canceled participation in Truth and Reconciliation Day field trips. So they just this is this sort of pro-Israel Jewish organization whipping up a storm, using the anti-Semitism stick, then picked up by broader right-wing forces, and turned that Grassy Narrows thing into a huge kerfuffle. And the logical fallout from that is, now students shouldn't go to Truth and Reconciliation Day, which is a federal holiday, right? The government, it's pretty legitimate kind of affair at this point, and that's it's an attack against democracy. The idea that it's not part of learning about being a citizen or participant in Canadian democracy, that going to protests in high school is not, or elementary school for that matter, is that's not, it should be mandatory, right? Like that should be part of it. Like obviously that is an essential part of democracy, but they've whipped up such a storm around this that they scared the board on this. A couple final things tonight. Political and Hill Times reporting that Elizabeth May is going to attend an event marking the first anniversary of October 7th attack on Israel. So the Politico and Hill Times report that. So I, of course, punched that into Google. Initially, I didn't actually think it was going to be organized by the Israel Embassy in Ottawa. I didn't. It is being partly organized by CIJA and the Israel Embassy. I actually thought maybe it was CIJA. But it's actually being organized by the Israel Embassy. Unbelievable. But then the second side to it, that I looked for Elizabeth May if she's participated in any demonstration. So in Victoria, they've had a demonstration, I think, every weekend. I've seen lots of reports. They've actually had pretty good numbers in Victoria, from my understanding, too. I couldn't find anything, Elizabeth May. Ottawa, they've had, I don't know if every weekend, but, obviously dozens and dozens. I couldn't find anything of Elizabeth May attending. She did say at one point she participated in a hunger strike for a day back in January for an arms embargo, but no, like, she didn't go physically to any protest. She just said she was hunger striking for that day in solidarity with that demand. So as far as I can tell, she hasn't been at one anti-genocide, anti-Holocaust protest over the past year. But she tonight is attending a ceremony partly organized by the Israeli embassy. Unbelievable. And, in that light, Jagmeet Singh, the head of the NDP, put out a statement that I saw a few hours ago on Twitter about today. And, it's, as I posted it on Twitter, it's a remarkable statement because it mentions the word genocide, buried, right? Buried far, like not in the actual tweet, buried. If you read the whole statement, it references genocide. But it's basically a statement enabling Israel to kill more Palestinian children, kill more Lebanese children, take more Palestinians hostage. That includes the word genocide. And I think that's kind of like impressive. You almost got to give Jagmeet's communications people a sort of bravo that you're able to do that anyways, but on a more positive note, Le Devoir had a piece this week saying davantage d'élus adoptent le terme génocide, mostly talking about the House of Commons debate on Tuesday evening about Lebanon, Palestine, and most of the NDP MPs use the word genocide. A number of the Liberal MPs are now using the word genocide. The Conservative MPs use the word genocide to say that Hamas is trying to genocide, Israelis or whatever. But sort of a positive note. And then the other positive is the protests. I mean, here I saw images from Toronto. They're saying there's 30,000 demonstrated. My understanding is it was some sort of like a regional, I guess, or maybe there buses from around the region. I'm not sure exactly the details. Here in Montreal, it was 5,000 plus on Saturday and about 1,000 on Sunday. Walkout today, I had to leave very early because I had an interview, but it was probably getting towards 500 already outside of Concordia, and people were clearly coming. And there's another demo tonight, actually starting, kind of was probably going to leave in a little bit here. I might try to go to it, so I should probably not go on for too long. But the mobilizations continue. There's, but of course, this has been a wild, intense, horrific year of genocide and Holocaust. And I'll open it up to comments and questions. I'd like to not go on too long, if it's possible. I see that Laura is actually here. If anyone has, I don't see any hands, but I'm going to try to get Laura co-hosting this. How do I do it again? Go ahead, Jake. I see you, so I think and I'm just going to get Laura here.
Yes, can I talk?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to comment about a week ago, I saw a fellow by the name of Richard Forer. I don't know if you heard of him. Forer. And obviously he's Jewish, and his knowledge of the whole thing about Israel-Palestine is immense. And he has a new book and so on. He was on Zoom meeting with, I think, Owen, the young Australian guy, and he said a few things that I didn't know. For example, one of them is that during the times, Hamas offered Israel a dozen times to sit and talk about peace. They never answered him. I knew about half a dozen times, but he said dozen times. He never answered him. Also, he said one of the things that I never heard, that in 1994 or 95, when the border wasn't hermetically closed, still there was some movement of people. He said a bunch of women from Gaza rented buses and so on and went into those kibbutzim nearby, singing and dancing and offering peace. And they said, we can live in peace. Don't hate you, and so on. And he said, just imagine if Israeli government took this and expanded on it instead of shutting it down and creating the hatred and so on. So it was you can find it on the YouTube, Richard Forer, about Zionism, the topic was.
Thanks, Jake. What was that last name again? Forum?
Forer, F like Frank, O-R-E-R.
Oh, okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean, you and he certainly know the subject far better than I do, but that's certainly my broad understanding is that, you know, obviously Palestinians I've tried to have some degree of cooperation, but Israel keeps choosing expansionism over security, and yeah.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Philip.
Hi, so I was following Dimitri Laskaris on his Twitter feed. He has Elizabeth May's statement about her attending this event that the Israeli embassy had, and you know, her comment is disgusting. She, you know, talk about the savagery, the brutality of the Palestinians, and you know, if she had attended, you know, something that a synagogue had put on, or an interfaith group condemning, you know, the violence and the suffering and the deaths of those before October 7th, during October 7th, and after October 7th, that'd be fine. But you know, she was just it was just complete demonization of, you know, and dismissing of what had happened to the Palestinians and now the Lebanese. It's disgusting. And I'm a member of the Green Party, and I'm thinking I'm at the point where I'm almost done with them. You know, she's got to go, and we got to get somebody with some integrity. You know, I mean, thank God for Jill Stein in the States and the British Greens. They're the ones that only seem to have any sort of sensible stance on this. You know, and if anybody has any friends or relatives who are Americans, I'd suggest you contact and send them some money to make a donation to the Green Party in the States, because you know the Greens here are useless, and I'm just disgusted with Elizabeth May.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, I just seeing them. I'm just actually just looking at it. I hadn't seen Dimitri's post and this letter. It's pretty. Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, as I was kind of saying, I don't. I think we have to, like, you can't not accept that the aim of October 7th, like, their innocent civilians were killed. There's no doubt about that. Obviously, it appears that Israel killed a pretty significant portion of those innocent civilians. You know, not official, like, accepted in a, you know, whatever. It's sort of accepted in a sense by the Israeli media referring to the Hannibal Directive and stuff like that, but not in any real kind of way. But the obviously those who were being engaged in Gaza, I don't think they just have a right to attack the military bases and caging them. They have a moral responsibility to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't be like, you can't try to pretend that these Israeli soldiers encaging everyone in Gaza are like some I mean, how in the world? Like, that's insane. Like, so that it has to start from that premise, and that's kind of what I was saying about, like, this reading this piece from Naomi Klein. Like, so there's this obvious omission in that she just, and I know she knows that the rape stuff is a hoax and that the baby thing, they've even sort of conceded on that one, right? The 40 babies, only one baby was killed. So it's like the 40 babies thing is a little bit hard to sustain, though they still gets kind of referenced. But so she obviously knows that. But then this is the bigger picture, which is and it's kind of like it's implied a little bit in the piece, but like the basic outline is that, I mean, again, yeah, you have the moral responsibility to now you can make the counter thing that, well, you know, you had to know that Israel's going to do what Israel's doing, and you can, you know, there is some like, and I don't think that's not like, you do have to, it is a responsibility of Sinwar and other people, leaders making those decisions to be, you can't just pretend, you can't just have the world as you want the world to be. You have to, you know, operate based upon how it actually is to some extent, while, you know, trying to shift the power dynamics. But so, you know, this may turn out, I think we still don't know, this may turn out to be like the defining point of Palestinian liberation. And it may turn out to be Israel's going to, they're going to succeed in they've already ethnically cleansed apparently 300,000 plus Palestinians from Gaza. They may still have success, that they're in a maximalist objective of basically driving everyone out of Gaza. And then it would be a huge failure from a Palestinian national perspective. If, I mean, obviously all the horror that, you know, individuals have faced, but from a longer term Palestinian national perspective, if they do ethnically cleanse everyone in Gaza, that's pretty clearly going to be a, you know, a big blow, defeat to Palestinian national aims. So I think we still don't know like where some of this stuff is going to go. But yeah, I think that to state like unequivocally that the broad, that's not to say all the specifics, but the broad aim was a you know, anti-colonial liberationist objective, and the fact that it came from somebody who you know, and I don't, I mean, I don't know that much about Sinwar, but my sort of understanding is that, you know, he's become, you know, like hardline, like, you know, there's a messianic element to it all. You know, he's in tunnel, he's expecting to be killed. There's, you know, there, like, so there's all these things, but like he's learned what Zionism is, right? He's come to his conclusions about what Zionism is and what needs to be done, and the level of suffering that Palestinians are going to need to endure to reshape the balance of regional forces and their national objectives and ultimate liberation. I mean, so yeah.
There's one last question by Claire, and then we'll end it. Go ahead, Claire.
Well, surely the people in the Middle East must be feeling that things are getting a little out of control. Isn't it possible that we should agree with Macron and not send any more arms to Israel and have a two-state solution and get the people in the Middle East to come to some resolution?
Oh, I mean, I think you know, a two-state solution on the 67 borders would be a massive you know, step forward from the current situation. That would be far less unjust than the current situation. Whether it's the ideal situation or whether whether it's practical now and all these kind of questions. I certainly support Macron's claim. I mean, he's
He
doing
retracted that, by the way.
well, yeah, he did. Yeah, I heard some of him backing away from some of that. But the basic point of that, the Western arms suppliers should withdraw what he framed it as their at least an initial comment, their offensive weapons for Gaza versus the defensive weapons that Israel uses to defend itself. That they should stop providing those weapons, and I obviously agree with that. And obviously Macron saying that is, you know, better than not saying it, whether he backs away or hedges and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, obviously principally the US, but all the other countries should immediately and should have long time ago stop the arms permits and stop the shipments, and certainly stopping the free weapons that the US is giving. And that's what the only thing that's going to really realistically stop Israel from doing all the criminality it's doing.
Okay, Eve, I think that's it. You can go to your event.
Okay, take
Thanks,
care.
everyone. Bye.